Thanks for being here today. My name is Avery Chavez. Thank you very much for joining us today to talk about maximizing fun and building more playful experiences in Meta Horizon worlds. I am a producer on Meta's entertainment content team. Voila. I focus on creating social VR experiences in the metaverse. These past few years, I've spent a significant amount of time in virtual spaces. I've worked at Meta for 6 years, and I've been working in Horizon since 2020. The real ones will remember this, but at that time, we were all just a bunch of floating torsos. We were a bunch of floating torsos just drifting through a land of opportunity that just hadn't been built up yet. But in the last few years, we've seen a rapid progression of growth and change in Horizon. Our tools are ones you'd be familiar with as game developers. We've enabled custom model importing and TypeScript, and teams are using a desktop editor to make collaboration easier across teams. But they're also still able to quickly playtest in headset. And it's becoming easier to create complex worlds. Just in the last year, we've launched gaming, social, and entertainment worlds like NBA Arena, Music Valley, Bobber Bay, Haunted High, Survivor Horizon Island, and of course, Super Rumble. These worlds are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in virtual spaces. And of course, our avatars have legs now. We've also expanded outside of VR, though. Last year, Horizon started adding some worlds on mobile and browser, and this is helping people engage and be part of the community even when they're out of headset or don't have access to one. This will vastly increase the reach of our worlds, which is really exciting. So because of all this, it's becoming a lot easier for community to find you and have fun in Horizon. We've heard that the worlds on Horizon feel closer to what you think of when you think of the metaverse now. So today, I'm very excited to have this conversation with some people that I quite like a lot, and we've worked closely together over the last few years. So first today, we're going to dive into the latest developments in Horizon and how that's impacted the worlds we're building. We'll talk about some specific examples of projects and how we fine-tuned those experiences to be more enjoyable for players. And then we'll wrap up with talking about what excites us about the future of Horizon. So let's start with some introductions. If you could please share your name and what you do. Let's go ahead and start with Kaio.
Hey everyone, I'm Kaio. I am a producer at Kludge Interactive, and it's been amazing working closely with Avery, the Meta team, the other studios, and crafting some amazing experience in Horizon in the past few years.
Hi all, I'm Ginger Larson. I work for Meta, and I work very closely with a number of our developers who are building worlds for Horizon Worlds. I'm a producer, and my background is actually on the game developers side. I used to work in sort of social and mobile games before coming over to Meta about 8 years ago, and working in Horizon is really fun. It's my first foray into VR, and I get to work with some really incredible people on kind of the cutting edge of what we're doing and building amazing experiences. It's like to be here.
I'm Sol Rogers. I help run a company called Magnopus. We build all kinds of VR titles. We created Mission ISS, which most people in this room have played because it was pretty early in the developer scene. It allows anyone to go to space. We also created Pixar's Coco, which allowed people to dive into that movie. And for the last couple of years, we've been working right at the forefront with pickaxes in Horizon, which has been incredible because it's been literally changing in front of our faces.
Pickaxes is a very accurate way of describing that. So let's talk about some of the biggest changes you've noticed in Horizon over the last few months and years in terms of just fidelity and interactive capacity. I think we've all been very aware of the developments that have happened lately. So what are some of the biggest changes to the platform that have impacted your work personally?
For us, I think the ability to get meshes in just changed it overnight. From the ability to kind of use whatever the tools were there, which felt a lot like a Lego kit, to being like, no, now you can actually create any game title you want to create, which is far more aligned to the brands and experiences that we want to create. It was huge for us.
I'd say that the desktop editor was a huge deal because the ability not only to speed up the process and, I don't know, work in a way that you're already used to, but then seamlessly changing between the headset and the desktop and then using it as a team, that I think improved so much the process and the whole idea of how fast we can create things and how fast we can iterate on ideas. It was a pretty much game changer for us.
Building on Horizon is a really interesting experience because we're building the tools that you need to make really great gaming experiences at the exact same time as we are building the great gaming experiences. And so there's always a little bit of this like eking ahead. And so one of the most impactful features that we've gotten over, in the past year is the persistence of player information across multiple sessions. So while that may sound like table stakes for a lot of gaming platforms, if you look back to where we were previously, all player progression had to be contained within a single session. You only had them for that window of time, and it reset every time. So now that we actually have that, you could have multiple sessions. It's really driving us to make games that are richer, and we reward players for coming back because they can level up and they can invest more, and we get to build much better experiences. That's been huge.
Goes a long way in making worlds feel alive, for sure. So what impact do these developments have on user experience, and how has the progression of these tools influenced the design of your worlds?
For us, we're the title we're most excited about, which will be coming out at some point. We're still working on it. We're working on The Office. So we get to work with a hilarious IP and with the showrunners right at the forefront to make something which will really excite players. And for us to be able to put those tools in, first of all, it has to look and feel like the IP.
Yep.
So it has to feel like you're in that world, first and foremost. And so all of those tools that allowed us to create something that feels like it when you go in. But that retention to bring players back has to have some of those tools. So progression, what you earn, how you play, where basically you get to take over the office and get like a career thing. So you get promoted to be able to run the whole place. So the next player that comes in, you decide the games you're going to play inside the space. It's so exciting.
That's great. Okay, so with Horizon, I'm thinking a lot lately about how the worlds that we're building are more like venues or restaurants or living, breathing spaces. And it's obviously like our responsibility as producers and developers to kind of keep those spaces alive. So what have you kind of learned from your users, and how have you iterated on that based on feedback? Because I know that this community can also be quite vocal.
Yeah, we've been building this game called Spice-Go, and it has over 20 levels. It's a platformer, and players are competing to get to the end of the level first. And at some point, we were like trying to understand how players were making decisions when you tried to have level design, for example. So like, where were they jumping, where were they falling? At which point players are just giving up and just leaving the game, deciding to not play anymore.
Yeah.
And then this analytical tool was made available to us, and we started to track this data and understand how players were interacting with this. And then it was more than just reading comments and hearing from the community, but also seeing how they were doing in each level and how they were behaving. And then we were able to start making these informed adjusts to level design. And what happened is the first update we did after these changes, we saw a 40% increase in new players completing levels.
Wow.
So it was like we had no idea how the data that we received from this community, especially when we are changing the features that we have in world and how these worlds are created. They're so important. They're so they make so much difference so fast. That was awesome.
Iterating on fun and not being too, for us specifically, trying to make a sandbox. Do you remember playing, there was an early demo on like DK2, which was like Toy Box. So you get to stand opposite someone, and it's just a table full of toys and play. There wasn't any scripted progression. There wasn't anything like a game design. There was just people playing together. And when we start developing The Office, we were putting in quite a lot of like, these are the games you're going to play. And we realized as soon as we got lots of people in there, they made their own games up. And so we left lots of room for exploration and for people to find their own fun and invent their own games. We leave a lot of clues in there because anyone that's seen the show knows like, oh, that's maybe for doing this, or this could be exciting to do that with. But once you put more than two people in a space, they create their own narratives. And I think that social part is the really big unlock for Horizons, which is there's always people to play with, and you're just going to like hang out together.
Totally. Yeah, I've been taught a lot by just watching users in the worlds that I've built. Like, how are they actually experiencing this world, and how can I make this world more tailored around how they actually want to use the space?
We have these assumptions, maybe from previous experience, that that's how players usually behave.
Yeah.
But that not always translates to VR and when they're in headset, because they are experiencing that world so uniquely in a different way that it's so interesting to see how they behave that they're in their worlds.
Yeah, and if there's one thing that users like to do in Horizon, it's just hack worlds and
Yeah,
mess around with
yeah.
them and try and break things and try and make things, for themselves. So with virtual development, change can be a little bit of a constant. As soon as you've kind of pinned down your development plan, your toolkit grows and you have new features to consider. And Saul, I know that you've experienced that a lot. So how do you keep driving towards a launch? Do you feel like you're more capable of altering the plan only if something awesome comes along, or how do you kind of find that balancing and still kind of driving towards the launch date?
It's just get that, in all development, I think we can all, as developers, get lost in the detail and forget that the players don't care how the pixels are created or why they're there. They just want to feel something. And so trying to get past all the features and go down to user testing as quickly as we can, and the people are going to use it and see if they like it, is more important than some new massive feature. Bringing in model importing, it's a no-brainer. We had to do that. Like that's not something you could skip out on. This now looks really, really good, and before it really, really didn't. So that's fine. We're going to implement that one. But the rest of it is, does it add something to the experience, to the fun of the game? And then you make a decision on it. Admittedly, it's pretty easy. The things have been rolling out in a kind of fluid manner. There's been a couple that have broke everything, but that's okay. We're building in a system that's we're building the plane whilst we're flying the plane. We're trying to land the plane, and that's what we're all being asked to do. Yep. But getting past the technical features and going straight to how does this make the world better? And if it doesn't make the world better, then we don't need to implement it.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about fun. That's why we're here. So can you tell me about a moment recently where you enjoyed yourself or had fun in Horizon?
I took some stakeholders to a Horizon tour 2 weeks ago, and they have never been in a headset and never been in Horizon. And they are very serious people. So we went to this world where you have low gravity when you jump. And I didn't say anything. And at some point, someone started to jump. And the reaction that the person had, and that how everyone in that team started to jump nonstop, and experiencing how incredible it was. I think Horizon has this thing where you are trying to create something that resembles the real world, and then you add some magic to that. And I think that was really interesting to see that magic, and people okay, there's something wrong. Oh, this is nice. Oh, I love this. I want to do this the whole time. I don't want to have this meeting in here anymore. I want to just play and start jumping around. It was very, very interesting to experience that, for sure.
There was a game that I worked on that actually recently came out called Tapple, which you might be familiar with the physical board game of, but we managed to recreate that inside VR, and it's incredible. There was this interesting turning point in the development of that project, because in the early days of testing it internally with our team and bringing people in, there was a lot of trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we play correctly? How do we get the controls right? Or how do we teach people how to do it? And I remember one play test after we hadn't played it, in a long time. I brought my team in again, and we'd solved enough of those issues that people were able to start playing, and the game just devolved into this hilarious debate of, I don't know if you're all familiar with the game, but you have to name things that are within a category, and it just sparked all these debates around can you put nettles on a pizza? Does that count as a pizza topping? And yes, it does, by the way, and they're delicious. But we would go off, and it was just, that was the moment where we felt it, where people were arguing, laughing. I think I was working from home that day, and my partner sent me a message afterwards. It was that was a really loud VC call. But we found the fun. It was that moment where it's okay, we're all doing it, we're playing, and we're in it. And that's really the best bit, when you don't see the platform anymore, you don't notice VR or not anymore, you're just having an amazing time.
We had one the other day when we were doing some play testing, where for some reason the developers all wanted to play parts in the office, and there's a couple of them which are really good at mimicking and doing impressions.
Yeah.
So we just felt like we were living in an episode of The Office for the morning. No one was playing any games. They were all just playing out scenes that they remember and running around just making their own show up.
Yeah.
And so that was just delightful to watch that play out in front of you.
It's really amazing watching a group of adults role play, flipping burgers
everyone
with
just
each
turns
other,
into
and
children.
feeding each other. Yes, it's make believe all over again. I want to talk a little bit more about this because I feel like we're getting to something. But like, what was it about these moments that felt joyful or pleasurable to you? Like, was it that they were like unexpected?
It's the shared experience. For us, it is the magic of humans at play. You know, adults or children all in the same place, inventing their own stories and building memories like you're really present with each other. You know, you're being released into immersive theater, or you're being allowed to go into a sandbox and just like let off the leash in some ways, because this is a magical place that you can just go and have fun in. And so that sort of stuff was just really cool.
That's awesome. So Ginger, you brought up the interconnected worlds based on board games, and I really want to hear a little bit more about them. So can you tell me a little bit about them, and then what was it like to create an immersive world based on a board game?
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of working with an incredible development team, Nerd Ninjas, to create 3 absolutely stunning board game themed worlds in Horizon Worlds, and the main kind of world is called Board Game Landia. It is exactly what you would expect. You are a tiny game-sized person running around this delightful environment crafted of different materials and board game pieces. There's like a house of cards. You have like pencils that are street lamps. You can put coins in this toy capsule to start playing a game of chess or checkers. It's really cool. And from there, you can then travel to a Tapple world and a Hues and Cues world. And both Tapple and Hues and Cues are established board games that exist in the real world. And that's where I would say both like the challenge and also a lot of the fun came in. Our challenge was we were trying to develop a game that had familiar gameplay. People already knew how to, like, people would recognize Tapple. They had expectations for what playing Tapple would be like. They had expectations for what Hues and Cues would be. And so we needed to deliver on the expectations around this gameplay that people were used to playing, while also trying to make something new and fun and exciting because it was in VR for the first time. And we did that, but I believe we did that. But it was a big challenge. I remember one of the things in particular was with Tapple, it's a game where you have the board, and in real life, you're all sitting around a table, you know, and you're playing the board, and it's really easy to interact with each other and the board at the same time. And one of the challenges we found in VR is that your sense of presence and how you relate to other people is totally different. Yeah. And so we really struggled with getting the layout right so that you could see the board comfortably and still look at the other players, which was important. What we ended up doing was, instead of having it flat, is we raised it and had it float in the air, and so you can now look across from it while you're doing it. But those kind of challenges are ever present when trying to come up with how these experiences are going to work. So, yeah.
So I know one of the challenges that I find in terms of game design for a virtual space is balancing solo versus multiplayer design, because you never know if it's going to be one person who joins the world or 6 people. Or so how did you have any insights to share from Board Game Landia?
Yes, this was another interesting thing, because when you think about board games, usually people supply their own players. they have the people with them and the board game. They're like, great, we're all going to sit down and play this together. You don't necessarily get that in Horizon. In Horizon Worlds, people come in and they often visit worlds somewhat independently, and they expect to find other players when they get there to that world and then play with them there. So it was a really interesting challenge for us to figure out how that would work, and we tackled it in a number of different ways. One of the things we did was we actually added, the Nerd Ninjas team created a single-player mode for both Tapple and Hues and Cues that allows you to, if you happen to be the only one there, you can still experience it. You can still try it out and kind of play against yourself, and that was a really cool way of making sure that should you be the only one there, there's still a way for you to have fun. We also spent a lot of time experimenting with the join game flow of like what it was like to start a game, how you knew when a game was starting so you could go and be a part of it, or hop back out, but understanding who was playing. And then the other really cool thing that we did is we actually made it so if you're in Board Game Landia, you can meet up with a group of players there, and then as a group travel to a new instance of Tapple or Hues and Cues, and then all play together as a group. So those are some of the ways we tried to kind of mimic that sense of find the people, then play the game.
That's great. It's giving me some ideas on another world I'm working on. So Horizon is expanding to mobile and web, which I feel like is a true game changer, both in the terms of the way that we're widening the audience, but also in the way that we're kind of developing worlds. So what do we feel like is the opportunity with expanding to mobile and browser?
Oh, it's just the number of users. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Like, being in VR, we know, is the most immersive and most exciting and most different way of playing a game for years. But the idea that we can now create a title and allow it to also have a version that can go to anybody with access to a web browser instantly changes the game immediately, because the content we're going to create has this high-fidelity version, but you may be able to create a version that allows people to come and get excited before they go to VR, or you might have something that can access hundreds of millions of people overnight, which, as someone who runs a business, is a big opportunity and gets people very interested in developing in Horizons, because it's not only something that lives only in VR, it's in VR and mobile immediately.
Totally. Kaio, I know that you've worked on 2 experiences recently, Spy School and Halloween Horror Nights, that are both on VR and then in mobile and browser. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how that kind of cross-play experience influenced the decisions you were making?
Sure. I believe when we're thinking about creating experiences that are supposed to be played on these different platforms, and when you take into consideration how players experience that when they're using the headset or when they are seeing it in flat screens, it's like when you're trying to interact with something in VR, the way you extend your arm to that particular object and how fast you do it can impact that design decision. And when you're at flat screen, it's usually a button or a mouse click. So those things make it challenging, you understanding how you're making these decisions. And I think you have very particular strengths and weaknesses in each of these platforms.
Yeah.
And exploring all of them at once can be challenging. And what we usually do is we try to find the easiest approach, the easiest design solution, the easiest design hypothesis to test, because that is what usually you can translate to different platforms. So in Halloween Horror Nights, for example, it was a haunted house experience. So players want to get scared there. You need to scare people as much as you can, as often as you can throughout that experience. But how you get scared when you're looking at it on a screen and when you're inside a headset is completely different.
Yeah.
So you have jump scares that work very well in one scenario and don't work for the other audience. And instead of trying to make jump scares that would work for everyone, we understood that it was easier to simplify some jump scares and then balance it so that people would get scared in different places inside that world, depending on what they were using to experience it. But overall, they would have this wholesome experience of being scared. And Spy School is a little bit different because we built that world for VR, and then we adapted to mobile and browser. And for example, when you're in VR, it's so simple to make a 90-degree curve. You just use your joystick or move your head.
Yeah.
It's tricky in mobile, just making that fast curve. And then we started to adjusting level design, so removing some things and adding some things to, again, balance things so that everyone could have the whole experience. Maybe not the same way, or probably for the good, not in the same way, but they could still experience it.
So why are we all here? Why are we drawn to this space? What's so unique about Horizon?
I mean, there are many things, but I think from a development standpoint, one of the really cool things that it offers is a new way of collaborating amongst teams. As a producer, when I work with teams on projects, I have a lot of conversations that are around things like, I like this, but something doesn't quite feel right here. Let's tweak this. And one of the things you can do in Horizon is you have everyone in the same space, looking at the same thing in the same moment, and you can pick things up and move them around and try them out and be like, well, let's pivot this. What if we turned this table this way and have this? Or what if the hallway went here? Let me move this out entirely and drop this in. But this real-time collaboration is like nothing I've ever experienced. Even sitting next to people coding on a computer, you've still got that window of time when you're waiting to see something, whereas this is everyone there all at once, and you're seeing it from the perspective of the player. That's pretty groundbreaking.
Yeah, the opportunity for gray boxing and prototyping in Horizon is massive.
It is massive.
It was a relearning thing we had to do when we started working on it, which was just get in it as quickly as possible. Just try everything out. Try the mechanics, play the game as quickly as you can. Stop designing on paper, start designing in experience. And that persistent nature of it just is one of the big cool things about the whole project.
And Horizon is evolving so fast that you can never lose the opportunity or miss the opportunity of just being in the headset and exploring new worlds and new things, because there's always a new world with a new feature, with a different approach, and users are evolving as well because they are experiencing these new worlds and they are getting used to these new features and they expect to see them in everything new that's coming up.
Are there any best practices that you've learned along the way that you would like to share with the friends here?
Play test as regularly as you can. I mean, that's the easiest thing. Just as often as you can with as many people as you can, and outside of the team that are developing it. So we bring in anybody from the company, from security, from like front desk, like anyone, because do you know what? It's not all just about people that really know the platform inside out. Get some people that don't know it and see if they can still use it. Like, does the first time in the world make sense? Because one of the challenges is with Horizons is you go into the world and people will leave pretty quickly because there's so much you can go and do instead. So unless you can hook them and make it simple and make it engaging, that first user experience, it's like really, really like that, one of the highest things to keep retention and get people excited about the world you're building.
Yeah. I'll second that. I think that the more you spend time in Horizon, in the headset in Horizon, the better for you and the whole team. And especially play testing with people who are different, who have different backgrounds. Like kids, they experience this in a way so completely different than we can potentially understand. And then you have some people who have absolutely no experience with headsets, with games, and then they go in and they perceive it differently. They understand it differently. It's you can learn a lot with playtesting with different audiences.
Different skill levels.
Yeah, totally.
Yep. Yeah, I need to get my mom to play test some of my experiences. Probably learn a lot. Okay, so looking forward, what are you excited about in Horizon? What tools or features would you like to see moving forward?
I think the expansion of cross screens is really, as that tool set becomes more straightforward, like they're trying to make that tool like, in quotes, automatic. You build once, you can deploy everywhere. I think that's exciting. And then at some point, way in the future, some way of monetizing that space would be really exciting. At some point, way in the future.
I think, from the side of the platform, right, I think our goal really should be to enable people to build the experiences that they're envisioning. Right? That should be our focus. We want to have tools that just allow you to make the thing that you see in your mind. And so I think we're going along that path. There are many more steps in front of us. We have taken a number of them. We could definitely benefit from making some improvements to the world travel experience, what that's like as you navigate around getting between worlds. World capacity is another constraint that we're all up against, and we're really working on trying to make more efficient worlds that can hold more so that we can offer richer experiences. And I think, to your point, Sol, as Horizon expands to more devices, I would expect that we would invest more in getting some more familiar features of free-to-play platforms, like monetization, like advanced player progression. Like those will become really important for us to get right.
Totally. I think that, at least from a developer perspective, we've been working and building games for so long, and we've grown so accustomed to many tools and features and softwares. And more we can use those to build Horizon. We can use those to integrate with what we're doing in Horizon. I think that gives us, it adds so much to the developer's experience of just creating with the tools that you have been using, and there are often so many more available. And I think that will keep growing, that will keep happening. At some point, we won't be able to say, okay, we're developing for Horizon just by what tools we're using, because they will all be available for Horizon.
Awesome. Well, I'm getting the few-minute mark hand wave. I really love the conversation that we've had today. Thank you to Kaio, Ginger, and Sol for being here and sharing your perspectives. It was really insightful to hear you talk about everything. I hope we've piqued your interest in building in Horizon. The platform has a lot of incredible attributes, and we're only moving forward from here. If you have any questions, we're not going to do a Q&A today, but find us in the hallway afterwards, and we're probably going to go somewhere to drink afterwards. So if that's of interest, stick around. Thank you, guys.